What up, everybody? Welcome to the IAG Thursday thing. This thing we do every Thursday, and we've been pretty damn good about being on this every Thursday, where we're in our Discord recording a podcast for your entertainment, and maybe you'll accidentally learn something too. It's nice to have a nice little spot where you're gonna be able to hang out. You're gonna have some laughs, but it's also fairly educational, and you can tell your boss you're learning things. So either way, today was stressful. I'll explain why in a minute, but today was awful. If anybody knows what's going on, it is F5 day within the grid life community. But I'm joined by a fellow F5er and also the tuner of my own personal vehicle and a vast majority of my customers, Graham at Boosted Performance Tuning. What's up, Graham?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Man, dude,
I know,
my blood
right?
still ain't back, man. F5 day is the day that everybody tries to buy their gold passes for Grid Life releases the gold passes for the season, which means you can pre-buy all of your events. And it is always an insane scramble. And my internet decided to just go out literally the very second that these went live. And I thankfully was they implemented the top 5 in every class get kind of early access. So it wasn't nearly as stressful for me as it usually is. But I mean, last year I didn't even get one initially. So I was losing my shit, dude. And then I know you were stressing out too, because you're trying to get a full gold pass this year, right?
Yep, exactly. And I was worried since they opened up basically the membership. Anybody, somebody who's never even driven a car in their life could have potentially bought a membership and had access to buy a gold pass. Now, obviously, Grid Life said they're pretty sure that most people are going to be serious and already existing gold pass holders, but that membership kind of, in my opinion, I was worried about people cutting the line. So I was like, man, how quickly are they going to go this year? It was 2 minutes, maybe even some people said 1 minute last year, and Midwest was gone. And within 2 minutes, like some other ones were gone. But yeah, so I was stressing a little bit. But even at the actual time, I watched the clock. There was an entire 5 minutes. If you were ready and you were on there at noon, you could get any event you wanted locked in by 12:05 Central Time.
That's
So,
amazing that
yeah.
I think they're starting to get that situation figured out, which is
Yep.
good.
Luckily, so Jeremy Bailey and I, we both expected and know how things can go. We were both sitting there checking right around 11 a.m. Central. So in other words, an hour early.
Yep.
Just wondering if maybe somebody might accidentally turn it on in the wrong time zone. And sure enough, the tickets popped up. There they were. So Jeremy and I both went ahead and bought ours right then. And then before we could even tell anybody, they had closed it back down. And, a few folks slipped in there an hour early. But again, even with that happening at the actual time, there was still an entire 5 minutes. So I don't feel like anybody should have any excuse for not having a gold pass if they wanted one this year.
This year. All right.
Yep.
We're also joined by producer Jordan. We just had a hell of a technical snafu, and he's always here to help me out. Mr. Executive Producer Jordan, how you doing, sir?
Doing good. And unlike you, I had a smooth experience with Gold Pass. I waited till after 1 o'clock, and it was smooth sailing. Not an issue.
You can kiss my ass. And then we also have Randy always helps us out with the thumbnails. My brain's gonna be fried today. I'm gonna do my best. Randy helps us out with the thumbnails. Really appreciate it. He made a nice thumbnail for this. I don't know what we do without Randy. I was actually kind of expecting Warranty to be here, but he's probably got adult things to do, so it's okay. I don't think we were going to have too much issue today because we got a pretty solid topic. Today, we're going to talk about a highly misunderstood kind of this dark art thing within tuning, and something your car may or may not have. AVCS. AVCS is basically Subaru's version of variable cam timing. Okay. Not to be mistaken for like VTEC. Honda does use the term VTEC quite a bit in quite a few different vehicles. I think they have some versions of VTEC that work kind of similar, but it is variable cam timing, not variable lift. So what does that mean? What is this exactly? I guess the easiest way to start on AVCS is what is it? AVCS essentially is a system where it uses a fancy timing pulley on the end of your camshaft that can phase, so it can move and either add timing or take away timing. Well, it'd be advance or retard timing would be the technical term for that.
Yeah, sure. Let me take a stab at explaining it.
Yes.
Help you out here since your brain's fried. So what it is the cam gear. The cam gears are turned by the timing belt, right?
Yeah.
And then they turn the camshaft. So essentially what an AVCS gear does is it disconnects the gear itself from the camshaft in a way that it lets it adjust when the camshaft is actually opening the cam. And it does that using oil pressure, essentially. So that way, your engine can be in time, but you can control when the valve is opening. You can open it earlier or later. So that's the technical, what is it and how does it work?
Yeah. Now it's essentially powered by oil pressure. Okay.
Yep.
So oil flows into it and then it's kind of regulated by this AVCS solenoid on an EJ, and it's also internally regulated within a FA engine. It's not quite the same thing, but the concept is the same. Long story short, it uses oil pressure to move it whichever way it needs to go. More oil pressure, the solenoid doesn't open up as much. It's going to give you more timing. If the solenoid is open more, oil can flow through it a little freer, and then you get less advance. So that's pretty much all there is to it. It's really simple. But when you think about it that way, it's ungodly crazy how simple this system is, but how well it works. It's the same thing with like DCCD or something like that, where it's a really complex thing that works extraordinarily simple. With a Subaru, though, it gets a little more interesting because we don't have just one head. Also, we have two heads. So in a single quote unquote AVCS car, we have two of these gears. In a dual AVCS car, we actually have four: intake and exhaust. So this system was basically it basically started getting implemented in the very early version 7, in the early 2000s in the version 7 engine. That's the version 7 STI 2-liter. I think, to my knowledge, is the first engine to come with AVCS. Have you ever seen anything else come with AVCS earlier than that, Graham?
Not that I can think of. So like circa 2000 to 2002 in Japan?
Yes.
That's
So
about,
yep.
Yep.
Should be 2000 model year in Japan.
Yep. Somewhere around there. That's the first one. And we got it on the STI in 2004.
Yep.
Was our first one here.
We got that's the first time I've ever seen that I know of that AVCS exists. And then, like Graham said, here we got it in 2004. Technically, I think we got it here first in the 03 Forester XT.
That would be true. Any drive-by-wire EJ also had AVCS. That's an easy way to remember it.
It's the easiest way to figure it out. Here in the US, at least. In Japan, so if you have a version 7, version 8, version 9 engine, those are going to be drive by cable, but still have AVCS.
Correct.
But basically any of the turbo 2.5 liter EJs, all AVCS. So your legacy GTs from that era, your Forester XTs from that era, your Outback XTs, all of those had AVCS.
06 WRX, that's when WRX got it. So
yep.
So there's sometimes some misconception there. An 05 WRX doesn't have it, but an 04 STI did, because they didn't change to the 2.5 until 06 with the WRXs.
The 02 to 05 WRX is still non-AVCS. It is
in the US.
AVCS 2-liter in the United States. Yep. In Japan, They actually did have AVCS.
Yep. Hence the EJ20X.
Yep, that's where a lot of that
Or
came.
the JDM 205s. Yep, a lot of those do have AVCS, but people will commonly import those engines because it's a direct drop-in for their WRX. But then there's no way to control AVCS because the ECU doesn't have drivers on the board.
So what happens? That's a great question. Let's just hit that right now. So you get a lot of people who are buying these Japanese imported engines that as a cheap replacement for a vehicle. Let's say you've got an 05 WRX and you crap your engine. You're looking for a cheap replacement. You go get one of these, $2,000, $1,500, something like that. JDM 205s, and it has AVCS. What happens if you drive around and AVCS is not hooked up, but the car is set up with AVCS?
Absolutely nothing bad. That's the good news. So what happens is if you're not powering the solenoids, the cams just sit at rest. And at rest on the intake side is basically at the center line of the camshaft, which to boil that down without getting too complex means that the cams are sitting in their ideal position for high load situations. And they're also sitting where they would for idle, because whenever an engine is idling, Subaru turns off the cam timing because generally there's not enough oil pressure to advance the cam anyway. So basically they're sitting in the same position they would be at idle, and they're sitting in the same position they would be once you're at full throttle and let's just say past the mid-range of the power band.
Sure.
At that point, the cam goes back to rest or back to the zero position or back to basically not being advanced anyway. What you do lose is you lose the mid-range power that you gain with some overlap by being able to advance the cam, and you
We're
also
gonna
we're going to get to that. You also lose spool up. So in other words, you can do it. It's just going to be a bit more doggy in the mid-range.
Now it's a
And-
bit more doggy than a AVCS car with AVCS working. Not a bit more doggy than say a non-AVCS car.
Yeah,
AVCS.
exactly.
Is there any? This is something I've heard a few times, and I'd be interested to hear your take on that. Any worry about like cam float or something like that in that situation? Because these cam gears, I mean,
No,
technically would allow it to, I don't.
no, they're
They're pretty locked.
they're sprung in a way where they want to be resting at zero. They don't want to be, they don't float around.
It takes a pretty
on the intake side.
Like it's a decent amount of pressure to move them.
Exactly.
Okay.
Unless they're stuck or something's wrong with them or whatever. But assuming that they can move freely, they do want to rest at the zero position.
So there you go. If you guys are looking for a dirt cheap alternative for your bug eye or something like that, it's a valid option. Just to bring this up because these drive me nuts. You see a lot of these EJ20X swaps getting tossed in older WRXs and stuff like that. And when I say older, what I should say is you're seeing them tossed into a lot of 08 to 14 WRXs. I do have to stress there's a lot of people who will toss them in. A lot of car dealerships, I hear of this a lot. And then they don't get a tune. That's a problem. If your car was set up as a 2.5 liter originally, and you put a 2 liter in, lots changes with your tune. AVCS may be working, but the tune is not even close.
True. So let's jump back to our kind of outline here so we don't get too far off topic.
Yeah. So the next thing I wanna comment is there is one other system that Subaru did implement. It's called IAVLS, and that is a lot closer to what most people refer to as VTEC, and that has a variable lift to it. That was only available in the EZ30R that I'm aware of. We're not talking about that too much today, but it did exist. I'm not trying to say that Subaru did not do some sort of variable lift, but that was the only vehicle I know it existed in, and I don't think I've heard of anything else using a variable lift.
Nope.
At least not in the turbo or in the more performance oriented engines. They might have played around with that in like a like a 2.5 or like an NA smaller engine, but I don't know if we even got them in the States. We might have. I might get lit up on that later, and please let me know if I'm wrong.
Yeah. To my knowledge, I don't believe so either. So
At least not something you'd be tuning in the States.
no.
So, all right. So I guess the next thing we really got to talk about is why would you want to change cam timing? Okay. And this is where your expertise is going to come in because you're going to see the performance difference from changing these things. Why would Subaru go through all of the heartache of engineering something like this? There's probably two pieces to this. One is definitely going to be for performance, but I think there's also a emissions part of this, probably through efficiency, but there's also emission side of this too. Why would Subaru spend all the time to do something like this, and why would you want this system?
Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of benefits, but obviously from an OEM perspective, they're always thinking about meeting emissions first. They can't sell the car, they can't sell the engine if they can't meet emissions. And so variable cam timing is very much like an emissions first thing. It has a side benefit of being able to give us some performance because we can control the overlap, but first and foremost, it's for fuel economy and it's for emissions. And if you look at the factory mapping for a Subaru, you can see that is the emphasis. So, and the reason why it can do that is if you can advance the cam a lot at lighter loads, you kind of create an EGR effect, which means you're kind of reburning some of the exhaust gases by letting them slip back into the intake manifold, get mixed with fresh air, and burnt again. That's good. That's good for emissions. That helps them pass emissions.
Sure.
And then on top of that, in some of your other areas that aren't EGR areas, having the cam advanced helps with cylinder scavenging and pulling in fresh air and basically helps fill the cylinder, helps improve efficiency and therefore fuel economy.
Yep.
And then the third thing is, well, okay, the driver put their foot down. Well, if we use some overlap, that also helps build boost. Again, you're using that scavenging effect. The exhaust leaving can kind of suck in some air and help fill the cylinder up to a point. Once you sort of reach that efficiency, you need to roll the cam back and hold the charge in. And there you go. There's 3 benefits of AVCS.
So really, more than likely, Subaru did this more than anything for an emissions advantage. But I think what we ended up gaining was a pretty great way to add efficiency, therefore performance to this thing.
It's just kind of like it covers a lot of different bases. That's why every modern engine has it. It hasn't ever gone away. It wasn't a fad. It was the future, right? And Subaru was just getting on board.
Yeah, it's not like variable intake manifolds and stuff where you saw like all sorts of companies, messing around with that in like the 90s and things like that, and that's all gone. Like I don't know of any companies messing with variable intake manifolds these days.
Not anything that we're going to buy and afford.
Not.
It exists in the motorcycle world. It's pretty interesting, but
sure.
that's a whole other thing.
Those are also super high strung, naturally aspirated.
I know they're looking for 10 horsepower.
Yeah, and 10 horsepower is worth everything.
Yeah, but anyway, that's the benefit, and then that's why we when we go in there and do a recalibration, those are things that we take into account. Is how can we optimize things even farther? And a lot of times on some of the mapping is pretty good on a stock turbo. We don't we don't need to mess with it. But as we start putting larger turbochargers or built engines, then tuning AVCS, using a dyno, and using correct tuning knowledge becomes super important. It becomes a very valuable system.
So that's kind of going to lead me into my next question then, which is the OEM, the manufacturer Subaru here, is always going to go for the emissions part of this is going to be first. Okay.
Yep.
Then it'll be efficiency and then it'll be performance. So when you reorganize stuff and put performance and reliability at the top, what sort of benefits do you see even on something like a stock turbo by messing around with AVCS? Like where are the gains coming from? You don't have to
Well,
give me exact numbers,
yeah.
but like,
So again, to keep it simple,
yes.
we can reprioritize. We can reprioritize a little bit. So if we want the customer to have a bit more fuel economy, that's possible. Because when you're in, I don't want to get into whole it's a touchy subject, but let's just say that we can improve some fuel economy. I personally like to still try to be respectful of Subaru's intentions and emissions. I don't want to develop a tune that's going to be harmful for emissions. As long as people are not deleting things off their car, for the most part, that's not a big deal. But I personally have a better blend of fuel economy that I like to do with my cam mapping. And then in the mid range and in the spool up range, I optimize it there as well to get the turbo to spool up as quickly as possible, and then also make the best mid range power that it can. So
Oh, what? Okay, let me ask it this way then. If let's say you know nothing about how the system works and you go in there and you just because I remember seeing some wild AVCS maps back in the day with a lot of
yep,
tuners who just did not understand how it worked. Um, if you go in there, if there's no such thing as just max it out, it's just gonna work. It isn't like that. It isn't like I want all the VTEC all the time or something like
no,
that.
it needs to be right. If you're
Well, I mean,
advancing in the wrong spot, you're going to lose power. But up to the same point, if you don't advance enough, you're also going to give up some power.
so it's something that has to okay, here's what I'm gonna kind of ask. Let's talk about intake AVCS specifically right now.
Yep.
Is there earlier you had said that when you don't have AVCS hooked up, basically when it's at idle, it's at zero, mostly because it's not gonna have the oil pressure to move it. But when you're at top end full boogie, foot to the floor, it's probably going to be fairly zeroed out. So that's the idea then what I'm looking for is what does that blend kind of look like? Like when you're down low, you're trying to add more advanced retard. What are you trying to do there? Like
You're trying to advance it. You're trying to open the intake valve earlier is what you're trying to do
yeah.
when you want to take advantage of the scavenging effect.
Okay. So and there's a lot of different variables that play into that. How far your foot is on the gas, how much boost you can make at set RPM, what turbo you
Yep.
even have.
Scavenging is not going to start working until you start having some exhaust flow, which is
Yep.
going to require putting your foot down. It's going to require, starting to let air move through the engine in and out. That's going to create the scavenging effect. And that's when you advance your cam at the right point to take advantage of that effect, to fill the cylinders, to get the boost to build quicker.
Yep.
But then once you've reached that point, then you start to bring the cam back, remove the advance, in other words, move back towards zero, and just very generally speaking, the bigger the turbo, the longer you may end up waiting to move back to zero. Whereas a really tiny, small stock turbo, if you're testing on the dyno, you're probably going to find that getting back to zero at a lower RPM is what's going to be ideal, because the back pressure starts to overcome the benefit of the scavenging. And if you leave the cam advanced at that point, you're just going to be, basically letting the charge out, so to speak,
Yeah.
giving up some torque essentially, to put it basically. So
So
that's going to vary. It's going to depend on your efficiency of your setup. It's also going to depend on the size of your cams. There's so many factors, but that's why I say using it correctly is important.
um so we've talked a little bit about intake AVCS, and so all of the vehicles that I talked about earlier, all of them have intake AVCS. Starting in '08, the '08 STI, JDM and US domestic market both got exhaust AVCS. Now this is an STI only thing, okay?
Yep.
Exhaust, so they've got the same system on the exhaust now too, and now you're able to manipulate the exhaust cam timing. Now, what was Subaru's concept with that, and how can you benefit messing around with the exhaust side? Because we already talked about advancing the intake cams. What happens when we mess around with the exhaust side, and what's kind of the theories behind that?
So in very basic terms, the exhaust side, allowing you to move the exhaust side too, just gives you even more range of overlap. Okay, so let's say that, like, if we're talking on most Subarus, let's say that maximum degrees is 40. In other words, you can advance the intake cam 40 degrees relative to the crankshaft position at maximum, right? Then if you add the exhaust side to that and you give the exhaust side another, let's say, let's call it 37. I don't know the exact. Let's call it 37 to 40. You give it some more range. You can do even more overlap. Now, really, the biggest benefit there, in my opinion, and some people might argue with me, the biggest benefit there is really just even more of an EGR effect. Okay.
Yep.
You can really help the emissions even more so can be the goal of dual AVCS. And if you look at any other application outside of Subaru and you study the cam mapping, it becomes very obvious that exhaust cams are there. The moving the exhaust cam and the intake cam there together is for emissions. Now, I will say that on top of that, you can use it for some extra spool up, and you can also do something interesting where if you're shifting the intake and the exhaust cams together, you're kind of moving things relative to other things going on in the engine. In other words, you can phase them together. So that's a bit more complex conversation that I won't try to dive too deep into. But yeah, that's the thing about exhaust AVCS.
Okay.
Now, the interesting thing to point out is that we've talked about how intake AVCS, it rests at 0 and it advances towards, let's say 40 degrees generally.
Yes.
Exhaust AVCS doesn't work like that. Exhaust AVCS, the center line of the camshaft, at least on like an STI, is at approximately 17 degrees. So that means that when the car is sitting there at idle and the cam is not giving any oil pressure, it's sitting at 0, it's actually technically in the advanced direction. So intake cams move in the advanced direction. Exhaust cams, we always speak about them moving in the retard direction. What that means is that we're waiting to open the exhaust valve as opposed to opening it sooner. So when a dual AVCS car is sitting at idle and the exhaust AVCS reads 0, the exhaust cam timing is actually advanced. Okay. Once you start driving and oil pressure comes up, then it starts moving it and it brings the exhaust cam up off of 0 and it puts it into a spot where it's closer to its center line. In other words, it's more optimal position, or approximately where a single AVCS exhaust cam would be sitting. That's around 17 degrees. So from there, for the most part, if you study Subaru maps, you'll see that in the areas where they want the EGR effect, they'll run the exhaust cam timing very high. In other words, they'll kind of wait a longer time, and they'll also use it a bit for spool up, and then they'll move it back to that kind of 17 degree center line for full power. So again, it's just kind of there to like build upon single AVCS and its benefits, if that makes sense.
I got another question then. Let's say you have a 08 WRX that crapped its engine that comes with a single AVCS. That's normally single AVCS. And then you pick up an EJ20X that is dual AVCS, because in Japan they actually put dual AVCS in all sorts of different stuff.
Yep, that's a great question. We get asked this all the time.
Okay, so if you just stick it in your car, okay, and you don't hook up exhaust AVCS, what is that going? Is that going to affect performance, because that exhaust cam is not going to be sitting in its optimal position then?
Yep, exactly. Basically, what's happening in that situation is the exhaust cam's always staying at 0, so it's always opening the exhaust valve kind of early. It's letting out the charge a little early, so to speak. Now, some people actually, what they'll do is when they're putting that engine in, they'll purposely set their timing off by about 2 teeth. So if you move your timing 2 teeth off on your exhaust cams, they'll be approximately where a single AVCS car would be, and you'll kind of negate that negative effect. but it's not a huge deal. You're just kind of giving up a little bit of power if you just leave it as it is and don't power it.
What would that feel like from the driver's seat, though? Are you going to lose a little top end? Or are you going to lose a little?
It's more so on the top end. You're going to lose top end. You're going to lose some top end more than anything, and a little bit of mid range. You're really only going to notice it once you're at full boost.
Okay.
And if I had to say, probably more so on the top end than anything is where it starts to matter the most.
So if you do decide to lose your mind, okay, and get a dual AVCS engine, you happen to pick that up for cheap, and it's going to go in your single or non AVCS car. Honestly, you're probably better off trying to find one that does not have AVCS or is at least single. But if you are stuck with that and it's the only way you can get the car running, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, not a huge deal, so.
Or like Brad said, get a link.
That's one way to do it. Then you can run some wires to it and control it. So.
Yep. I mean, we used to do that with version 7 ECUs. We just run wires to it and repurpose TGVs, but can't do that anymore. You get in big trouble for that now.
Yes.
We don't do that.
So
I also
while
slightly misspoke too, and I want to make sure I say this. FA engines, BRZ and FA20, FA24, they all have dual AVCS, not just single. So they all come factory normal with dual AVCS. It's not just intake.
Yep.
So I think the next thing we have to talk about is in some extreme situations, why would you ever want to delete this system then? It sounds awesome. Why would you ever want to delete this system?
Well, that's a really good question. Some people we've talked to a lot of customers that did it because they thought that's just what you do. They didn't do any homework. They just thought, I don't need this. Now, I will say that if like in a really big turbo drag application where you're going to bring the car up on launch control and you're going to launch immediately into an RPM band near 6,000 and you're going to stay there, there's really no point in AVCS because you'd always be back at zero anyway.
Such thing as mid-range in a car like that.
There isn't. No, there really isn't. And if you're only going to take that car to the track and you really don't care about driving around and having it spool up a little bit quicker, an argument could be made that taking off AVCS is just one less thing that could possibly fail.
We're talking like 800 plus horsepower cars, okay, drag cars. That is the situation where that would make sense. Just so we're all aware.
That would be a reason. That would be a reason to do it. Would be that if you're never going to use it anyway, then taking off something that could potentially fail makes sense. Now,
the other side of that too is you may have such a large cam that you're not going to be able to use the system very much anyway because you have those cams have a pretty freakish amount of lift, and if you were to advance it the same way you would with a smaller cam, you have a really, really high risk of making valve contact.
You do.
Yep.
You do. So now here's the other thing. Here's the very important thing, and this could be argued, and some people have different thoughts on this. But on the exhaust side, as I mentioned, because the center line of the exhaust cam is not at one end or the other, I have personally seen and experienced a lot of problems. I don't want to say a lot, but I've seen it enough in high horsepower applications with variable exhaust cams on a Subaru that they don't stay where you want them because the spring in there is not strong enough to really keep it where you want it. When you're really high horsepower, fast shifting road racing, sometimes the exhaust cams can wander around in ways you don't want. So in my opinion and my recommendation, deleting exhaust AVCS on a track car with high horsepower can be a good thing to do.
What are we talking high horsepower there? Are we talking 500 plus? We talking
500 plus, 500 plus.
500. We're talking street mod cars. If we're talking like people are thinking grid life, we're not talking street. We're talking street mod.
Yep. If you're already in there, you're dedicated to racing your car. It doesn't go on the street. Deleting exhaust AVCS can make sense. I did it on my own personal engine, and we've done it on many engines that we've built with Six Star Motorsports because of the issues we've seen with it. It's just that the issues do not outweigh the benefit, in my opinion, generally speaking. Like that little bit of extra overlap that you can get, or that little bit of like in some applications, sometimes, you know, certain exhaust AVCS positions at high RPM on big turbos can produce some power, kind of like adjustable cam gears that we'll get to. Even though there can be some benefit there, the risk to me personally and to a lot of our clients outweighs that. So a lot of times we get rid of exhaust AVCS.
There's also another piece to that too, is if by deleting that, okay, one of the reasons that Subaru went to larger oil pumps was because when you're going to need to be able to push more oil, when you're having to activate these.
That's a good point too. Yeah, it's a couple more things using your oil.
Yes,
And oil going places in a Subaru engine is kind of precious. Let's be honest.
it
They're
really
not
is.
great. They're not great. So
No.
that's another argument, is that like taking away a couple of things that need oil pressure and leaving more for the things that need it could be argued.
Yes. Personally, I think it like kind of a rule of thumb, and I've always kind of went on this. If you're between that 5 to 750 to 800 horsepower range, and this is more like track oriented cars. Street cars, this shifts a good amount, but more of a track oriented car. You probably want to go to a single AVCS setup. Having AVCS with a turbo like the size that's on Boogie, I'm also on a single AVCS setup, is huge. Like we've had issues where like we had a wire or something go out and like lose AVCS, weird shit. Trying to drive Boogie without AVCS is really noticeable. We're talking like 1500 plus RPM of spool minimum. It is night and day. The mid-range goes right in the toilet.
Yep.
So it's the benefits of having that there are completely worth it, but I would say go to a single AVCS in that situation. If you're going 800, 900 plus, I would definitely consult your tuner. But there should be a conversation about, does it make sense to have AVCS or not? Especially if it's a drag application. For a track application, you're probably going to try to want to keep it. And again, there's not too many too many EJs out there doing 800 plus.
So I'll be curious to see in the chat the folks here that like, for example, Mike from Cosmic, they do the same thing on their big power cars. They go single AVCS only. Yep. And it's become standard with 6-Star Motorsports. It's just my standard recommendation to people. Not to say that like I haven't had plenty of success stories of high horsepower dual AVCS cars. So like I don't want anybody that's listening that has a dual AVCS build shitting their pants and saying, "Oh fuck, this is not going to," excuse me my light language, saying, "Oh crap, this is not going to work." I don't want to scare people. This is just this is the AVCS conversation. So we're talking about everything we've seen, everything we know, and unfortunately, as you know, Mike from Cosmic has noticed, and us with 6-Star have noticed, it can be problematic, and the benefits, in my opinion, don't outweigh the risk on high horsepower applications. So that's something that people should know, and I think that's hopefully a good takeaway from this conversation.
This is again, these are rules of thumb. No matter what, Graham's a tuner, but that doesn't mean he's the only tuner. And Mike from Cosmic, same situation. They're an awesome shop, but they're not the only shop. Talk to your tuner about it. Okay, talk to your builder about it. See what they have to say. But rule of thumb, just kind of wrapping your brain around it. That would be the recommendation. So, yeah, I mean, we've already got some absolute killer info on this, so this is awesome. We need to talk about adjustable cam gears. So let's say the argument's going to be if we delete AVCS, or even on the exhaust side, let's say we do delete AVCS. And what are adjustable cam gears? Okay, and what are we talking about here from a performance standpoint? Because it really only somebody who's like building an engine or going to be racing it are going to be talking about adjustable cam gears.
So adjustable cam gears is just the poor man's way of doing AVCS, but you only get to pick one angle.
Yep. So one or the other.
Yep. So now, obviously on the intake side, you're gonna do some testing on the dyno, and you're gonna figure out where, what's the best blend? Like what is the point of adjusting the cam that gives you the most area under the curve or puts the power where you need it for a drag application?
Yep.
Now, when we talk about deleting exhaust AVCS, that does open up the conversation to put adjustable cam gears on the exhaust side and play with them a little bit to see if a bit of advance or a bit of retard does offer some significant horsepower at points in the RPM band. And I
Yep.
know that's something that we're going to do on your car.
It's something we've talked about playing with quite a bit.
Yep.
There is also there's another part to that too, that degreeing a cam, essentially making sure that your top dead center point, the center line, the center point of the cam is exactly center as you want. Cam manufacturers can be a hair off sometimes. Different engines want different things, and this is with an adjustable cam gear, you can make sure you are dead nuts where you want it. So instead of just assuming, because you're taking different parts, a solid cam gear with a solid cam, you've got two manufacturers, they're approaching stuff a little differently, and their tolerances might be the opposite side of the other company's tolerance, and before you know it, you got 3 or 4 degrees in the wrong direction, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a ton.
Yep.
So, yep. But yeah, I think we're gonna play around with that a little bit. So in that situation, what do you think would be the play? Let's do some theory talk about Boogie here, right?
Yep.
Let's say instead of on 0, we were to add some exhaust advance. Where would what would that look like on a dyno or something? What are we hoping to see at least? Like what's the goal? If we were to add this, what might we see?
Well, obviously we're looking for more torque. We're looking to improve the efficiency of the engine. And remember, if we boil down an engine to the most basic concepts, we're trying to get air and fuel into it and out of it as efficiently as possible.
It's an air pump.
So it's an air pump. So if we move the exhaust cams in one direction, if we establish a baseline with a trusted fuel curve and timing curve and single AVCS curve, and then we play with the exhaust cams a little bit of the time, we simply look to see, obviously with the power on the dyno, and also to some degree in the data logs, we can see things there that are helpful. But yeah, to answer your question, like what we'd expect, a lot of times on really big efficient setups, if we move a little bit in the retard direction, we can see some extra power. That isn't always the case. It can be the other way around. Then that's why you have to test and see what you can find.
Pierre, Will Tune for Tacos, PRE Racing. He just posted something pretty cool. He's like, track cars mostly keep the intake AVCS. Drag, usually it's full delete just for simplicity and consistency. Makes total sense, especially if you're launching and you're already like where AVCS would be full advanced anyway. So
yeah, that's what we talked about. Yeah, in drag, there's no point. I mean, there's not usually a point in drag.
No, it totally makes sense. And then what he added to that was he's never seen a car with adjustable exhaust gears that they couldn't find significant power on, which is interesting. That actually kind of gets me excited.
Will, I'd actually like Will to clarify that when he talks significant power, like, are we talking 20 or are we talking 100? Like, what's significant? What's significant?
What are we? Yeah. What? Yeah, I'm interested to know what you've seen, Will.
Or what he considers significant.
Yeah. So, I mean, 20 horsepower is 20 horsepower.
It is. That's yeah, exactly. I'm just curious what his typical findings are.
I'm believing we're gonna instantly find 100, but I mean,
maybe. No, I think 20 to 30.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'm curious to see what he says now. Because in my head, again, without having had a chance to play with it yet, in my head, I would assume 20 to 30 might be something we could find. But I don't know yet. That's why we're gonna do this on your car and see.
This is why we do stupid shit on my car. So then for science, this is I'm gonna say something that might be a little controversial, okay, but it needs to be said. Shops that don't test bad ideas on their own cars, I truly believe you should question. Okay. And especially shops that they should be involved with some form of race program, whether it's drag,
Yep.
anything. I don't care what it is. They should be involved with some sort of race program. If they're an actual performance shop, they should be directly involved with some sort of race program because it's
Don't
the
just have
best
some
place
don't have
to-
some bro on the internet tune your car for the track?
Yeah, I'm right. But not
Yeah.
only that, like, it's where you can test theories and ideas, and
Oh, I
it's
totally agree.
accelerated wear in a way you can't wait 200,000 miles to see if whatever's going to break is going to break. The best place to do it is throw it on something like Boogie and go beat the shit out of it.
Very true.
Literally, you should be trying to break stuff, which is what we do. It's what you do. You're not trying terrible ideas on customer
Yep.
cars or something
So-
like that. I'm not calling
so-
anybody out, and that's not what I'm trying to get at. I'm just saying, like, if you're shopping shops or tuners or whatever, figure out who they are working with and see what their experiences are. If they're
Yeah.
breaking shit, that's not a bad thing. That means they're learning.
Okay, before you tangent off too much more,
Yes.
Will answered back and said 20 to 30 is common, which is exactly what I thought in my head to expect. So that's cool. And that's significant. That's worth it. That's power that's worth it for time attack. So hopefully you can get me some of those adjustable gears from my car. Would be nice to have.
So a lot of people may remember this from last season, but we had an adjustable cam gear failure at Road America. Okay.
Sure did. And so that scared me out of the ones I was going to use.
Yeah, and I gotta be real, it probably scared a few people. Now, I'm not gonna go into exactly what was what or whatever, but we did go to a different cam gear manufacturer, okay? And we're now using Roger Clark Motorsports cam gears. I got the last set that they were making in that batch, and supposedly more are coming, but they also felt that the cam gear that I had on there, they had a copy of those. They had a set of those too, and they felt that there needed to be some more thread engagement with the little screws that actually hold the cam gear where they're supposed to be, which is what failed on ours and did the engine in. I'm gonna try. Okay. I'm going to try to get those for you, but I can't promise it. Roger Clark Motorsports makes some absolutely incredible cam gears, so I think that's something we should make personally. But
so that's what you sent me is you sent me just the fixed ones. So basically I took off the ones that you had that failed. We won't name any names, but I took off the ones I had them bolted on the car.
You have the Roger Clark Motorsports fixed gears, which are
fixed.
Still. I want to make sure those are good gears. Those will never fail on you. Those are rock solid, reliable.
I'm probably just going to use those for now, even though I would love to be able to have adjustable and chase the extra power just for simplicity and for not having to worry about something moving on that side. I'm probably going to give up the power and just go fixed and just use the ones you already sold me. Maybe down the road, if I yank the engine and I can get the adjustables, it'd be fun science experiment. But for me, I'm going to go fixed. For you, I'm excited to see what we can do with your car with adjustable.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows? Let's be real, dude. You're gonna break shit. Okay, things are gonna break. Okay, so you're gonna be in there again.
Oh yes. Oh, absolutely.
And you can throw some adjustable gears on. We can play with it, and you'll have a pretty good idea of like around the basic area that is gonna make sense for that. I mean, you're still on a 2-liter, and I'm on the 2.3. Things are a little different, but it isn't gonna be like other worlds different. Mike actually brought something up too, and this is a good thought. I actually kind of dig it.
It's Mick. It's Mick, not Mike.
Is it Mick?
Yeah, he just clarified in the chat. I thought it was Mike. I thought maybe he just left the E off at the end.
I have called him Mike forever. Okay, Mick. Sorry, Mick. I am so sorry, dude. You can bitch at me later. They still keep their drag cars single AVCS, and the reasoning is actually kind of interesting. I like it. It does help a spool a little bit, just in case the turbo dips off. And like if they're in an elimination race, and let's say that they don't get a great launch and it kind of falls out of their you know, the happy zone. It helps them on a big turbo, it's going to help dramatically so they can get that thing back up and running and ripping down the track. And if you think about it, especially if you're in an elimination race, it might actually be worth the trade-off. This is why you got to talk to your tuner.
Yep. There are benefits. Like I said, if you fall out of boost or if you have to lift or something like that, you know.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, yep.
Yep. AVCS is magical. Man, I don't know if we have much left to really talk about on this topic. I guess the chat, if you guys got any AVCS based questions, I'd love to hear them. And we'll see if we can answer them. We got some absolutely awesome guys in the chat right now. And it would be, you know, we definitely can try to answer whatever we can about that. Yeah. I'm trying to think of where I want to go from there. I've never seen an aftermarket AVCS cam. Oh, I know what I want to talk about. Okay. So the unfortunate happens in Subarus quite a bit, okay, where we have a bearing failure. I cannot stress this enough. Do not reuse AVCS cam gears and do not reuse AVCS solenoids if you have a bearing failure. Okay? Don't do it. They don't come apart correctly. You'll never clean them right. Just get new ones. I cannot tell you how many times it's awful. And
yeah, rebuilding them was one of the worst experiences I ever had. Not saying that I didn't get them to work, but it's worth it just to buy new ones for sure.
Yes. So, just get new ones. Don't try to rebuild them. And you cannot stress this enough. If I have seen it, and this is no joke, where somebody would reuse it and everything would seem to be working fine, but then they'd have a brand new engine, you know, they'd just put it together because it rod knocked and they reused it and they felt they cleaned it out good enough. And then they shit their engine again, like not even 100 miles later, because whatever was in there finally worked its way loose. Or the other side of that is you have bearing material in them and the gear itself just doesn't move. And then you're running around troubleshooting all sorts of shit, trying to figure it out, and you're pulling it all apart again. You're gonna end up replacing it.
We definitely all agree, you know, don't just like spray some brake clean inside there and hope it comes out. But Smedia brought up an interesting thing. You know, Outfront does have that cleaning service where they tear them all down, they tear it down completely, clean it out, and put it back together.
If it's a professional doing it, that's a completely different story.
Yeah, I think that
put it in your garage, and by the time it is said and done, you can have new AVCS cam gears in your hand that day.
Yeah. I don't, and to my knowledge, I'm not going to pretend to understand all of the exact inner workings of an AVCS cam gear, but could there still be passages and areas inside the gear that might be hard to clean out, even if they do open them up and clean them out?
I don't know. Again, if you become an expert at opening up AVCS cam gears, when we were at 6-star, we did that for a while and had guys that were really good at it. And even then, it was still a shit show. By the time it's all said and done, what you pay into doing that, and all the time you're waiting and the dice roll that it's going to be, and this is no offense to anybody who makes money off of cleaning AVCS cam gears or whatever, if that, but I'm firmly into just buy new ones. It just isn't worth it.
And I'll say there's been many times where I've had people get cleaned out gears done professionally, and they have sticky cam gears or sticky AVCS. Like it doesn't follow, it doesn't track, it's slow. It doesn't move. And I'm like, yeah, just get new ones, you know, because they must not have put that together correctly. Even by a shop that has done it many times, there's still room for error. So I'm with you. It's a cheap enough thing compared to the price of a new engine to just throw those things in the dumpster and grab some new ones. Play it safe.
So much better off. I understand that the you know, it's just one more expense. It's that I mean, you and I have a term for this. It's called the $200 box of fuck. And it gets you, you know, every single day that you're building a car back to running, you're going to throw out a random $200, and that's going to take up 2 days. you
Yep.
know, or well, 3. But it's the $200 box of fuck is real, and I get it, but this is not something to skimp on. It's the same concept of don't buy shit injectors, don't, you know, just do it right.
Yep.
You know, there's obviously other things you need to replace that sucks and it's expensive. Solenoids you got to replace, cam gears you got to replace your damn oil pump, and if your car has an oil cooler, for God's sakes, replace that too.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, good times. We got any fun questions in the chat? I'm trying to look right now. Oh, well, that was one of them. Tanner, you're good people. I just want to let you know. What's up?
I said to touch on the ABS gears, cleaning them out. It took over 8 hours to even do like 2 or 3 of them. Like,
that's brutal. I mean, that was your first time doing it. Okay.
So no, that was because I threw them in an ultrasonic cleaner, and then to purge the rotor or the phaser, I would dip it in oil and manually press the plunger to like force everything out until it stopped coming out black or shiny.
Yep.
So it took hours to do it, and then drying them out, letting them dry out and stuff. Yeah, it was a nightmare.
Like Boomberoo said, he's like, they clean them too, you know, and they've had some decent luck. And I'm not saying people haven't had decent luck with it, but what really sucks, especially if you're the customer, okay, let's say 9 out of 10 of them are good, okay, but if you're the 10 out of 10th guy, you're that one dude, you're paying to this shop now because you already took it to a shop because you don't know what you're doing, to go back in there and put new cam gears in. So you already paid them to fix the cam gear, and if your shop's cool, maybe they won't charge you for that part of it, but either the shop's going to lose their ass having to go in there and put the cam gear in, or you're going to lose your ass paying the shop to go in there again, which sucks. It just ain't worth it. Get new cam gears. Oh, and do yourself a favor. Turn-In Concepts makes these awesome bolts called FU bolts. And they get rid of those awful Allen key bolts, and switches them over to a proper hex. Like I think it's a 19 mil. Those things love to strip out. Oh, another one. These are all great AVCS tips. Now that my brain's working. Company 23. Okay. We just recently had them on the podcast. Company 23 makes these great AVCS cam gear tools for helping you keep an AVCS cam gear in place as you pull that bolt out and put it back in and torque it correctly. And for God's sakes, do not dugga that shit on. If you go and use an impact on an AVCS cam gear, you will almost always trash the cam gear. Okay. You need to torque them correctly. And I cannot stress it enough. Those Company 23 tools are worth their weight in gold. It's one of the only ways you're going to keep that cam gear exactly where it needs to be. It's worth every penny, especially if you're doing the work yourself. Just do that. And this is one of those things why I really recommend people take their Subaru to a Subaru shop to be worked on also. Graham, looks like we got a question for you from Tanner.
What do we got?
Okay. Don't share any of your secrets, but I'll be learning to tune my RS here soon with an R3. So he's going to be doing Helltech stuff. I try to talk him out of it. Any tips for someone just getting into trying to tune and play with AVCS outside of focusing on fueling V?
First of all, get a Link ECU. Save yourself some heartache. Just kidding. If you really want to stick with the Helltech, that's fine. But so basically, let me think. Best thing I could say is to go dig up a stock map, dig up a stock AVCS map that'll kind of give you an idea. Okay. Long story short, a little bit of advance once you're off idle. Ramp up your advance in the spool up area. Taper it down with RPM. Taper it down to 0 with RPM at high load, at full load. That's AVCS map shape 101. Then what you do, once you have your timing and your fueling, get up to a boost level that is something sensible, something reasonable, something safe. Maybe 20 PSI, maybe 25 PSI, kind of not what the maximum's going to be, but something that's kind of on the way there. And then spend some time just making AVCS changes while you're on the dyno to see if carrying more advance gives you more torque or, reducing the advance sooner gives you more torque. That's it. That's pretty much how to tune AVCS 101. It just kind of takes some time and takes some practice.
Do you remember seeing AVCS plateaus?
I've seen some awful maps. I've seen some things that I've seen all kinds of things, but yes, I've seen some awful AVCS maps that clearly people just threw numbers in there and didn't understand what the heck they were doing.
No idea what was happening.
Nothing ever in any kind of a map should ever change drastically. If you've got cliffs and valleys and drop-offs in any of your maps, something's not right. That's just a red flag.
So, Jay, you just brought up something. Dewey, how do you feel about BC adjustable cam gears? I just got in here. If someone asked, okay. Jay, I'm not trying to throw companies under the table. What I am going to tell you is I really wish BC's had slightly more thread engagement. And we're going to leave it at that. Okay. There are other options out there that I think probably would net better results for you. Yep. What else do we got? Media appreciates that. Tanner's good people. And yeah. I'm sure if you ever you were playing around with it, if you need to PM Graham,
I just told him that he can hit me up.
Yeah, Graham is an extraordinarily easy person to hit up, and he's very community oriented. That's why
at this point, Dewey, I'll pretty much almost tell anybody anything about how to tune cars because I have more business than I can keep up with. So I don't really have any secrets. I won't give my maps away, but I'll help you. I'll help people because that's the thing to do. I have too much to do. I have too much to do.
You have so. What are you trying to protect at this point? And plus,
yeah. I like to, what's the saying you always say? A rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
Right. If any human being is worth a shit, in my opinion, and I can tell they care about their customers and they're a tuner, I'll share things back and forth. I told you recently, a friend of mine, we're both tuning our Ford Raptors right now. At the same time, trying to kind of learn Ford Raptor tuning and Ford tuning, we're literally sending each other's maps and logs. I'm sending him my unlocked map and vice versa so we can look and borrow and brainstorm. Because that's just how you do things. That's how you get things done. You work together, don't work apart, So
this is something that it brings me into something else there real quick. So let's talk about grid life, which is this small thing in the grand scheme of stuff. In GLTC, there is this whole wad of Corvettes, okay? And they're all sharing information between each other, and it's making them stronger as a group.
Yes.
Okay. Now, we need to look at this, you and I, from just purely a business standpoint, not even a community standpoint. If you see a bunch of Subarus doing well, you are more apt to purchase a Subaru and try to do what they are doing. Okay? So let's say you're just at a grid life event. A dream of mine has always been having 5 or 6 Subarus all there. It's all different people who own them, but we're all working together towards the same goal. And to a certain degree, we kind of have that, especially when we have Jeremy with the BRZ, and we've got me with Boogie, and me and you sharing info back and forth is actually really similar.
Mm-hmm.
But you know how awesome it'd be to have 6 street mod Subarus all together and we're all just sharing data?
Yeah, as long as they keep running at the same time. But, that's a whole nother problem that you and IAG are solving.
Yeah, we're doing really good, okay?
We are doing good. We're getting there.
If it was not for that damn cam gear, we would have went the whole season, no problem.
I know.
No problem. And that would have been, I gotta be real, the first season we've ever pulled that off.
Right.
So we're getting there. And data sharing is huge. You know what I mean? I know we're on a wild tangent, but we're kind of past that anyway. But data sharing is huge. And that's one of the things you came from the community, You came out of the community as just some bro who had a Subaru, and then you wanted to learn how to tune. In fact,
Yeah.
I remember right.
Dominic Casilla was my first tuner. I went searching for tuners once upon a time and looked at who was out there, and I thought, you know what, this guy Dom, I like this guy. I like his style, I like his forwardness, but I like his approach. And I used Dom for tuning before I tuned myself. He was my tuner.
Yep.
So, and he's a great guy. He's a good friend now. He's somebody I can talk to anytime. He's somebody I called up when I got stuck on some Link ECU stuff when I was first learning Link, and he's like, "Oh yeah, hey, let me remote in," and like we banged it out. Or do you remember that time when you were still at IAG and he was in town, and I had that 335i on the dyno and I hadn't tuned a lot of them?
Yes.
Dom came down to the dyno and sat with me in the car. We tuned the car together. It was awesome. It was awesome. You know what I mean? Because that's the kind of guy Dom is. He will help you. He, you know, for the most part, as long as again he feels you're worthy of his help. He can be a little touchy, and I won't disagree on that. But he's a great guy, right?
I also believe that you pulled some of your approach from him. You know what I mean? Like, because that's how he was with you, and that's how you tend to be with everybody else.
Yeah, that's exactly. I try to be, I try to be a good person and do well. You know what I mean? And pay it forward.
And again, I'm not trying to like sell the world on go to Graham or whatever. I'm just saying, like,
I mean, you remember what? No, I don't want to. I'm not. No, exactly. I want there to be more good tuners. I don't want to be the only one, because when I started tuning, it was at the time, at least around here, it was not good. It was not a good scene, and people were nasty to each other. You know, people would just like talking shit was the more common approach than offering a good tune.
So
right?
You understand when he's saying more good tuners, what he's actually saying is like, he's not saying that these were incapable people of making great tunes. He's saying that like sometimes people got a little unapproachable, and then it was constant shit talking between different tuners and stuff like that. And it just like the scene not that long ago was kind of shitty. And this is where I think Subarus have improved in a dramatic way.
Yeah.
If you look at 10 years ago, how tuners talked about each other to like how people approach it now, it's so different.
It's gotten better. It's gotten better in our community. Some communities are still awful. Man, I'll tell you what, the Corvette community that I've been trying to dabble into with the C8, man, they're not there yet. They are not there yet. Everybody's working for themselves for the most part. I have a couple guys I can kind of share with, but it's not like Subarus. So anyway, that's my approach, is like you always say, rising tide lifts all ships. I want people to have more. I want people to go to different tuners and be able to get good experiences. And if that means I help a different tuner that somebody wants to use, great. And oftentimes that tuner can help me a little bit. And that means that if I run into something weird, I can help my customers. And by and large, the community of Subarus feels like they have a better place to exist.
Yeah. And that's what it really should be. And this is a community. Okay. And we really, I've said this a million times before, and I'm going to say it again. It's really us against everybody, because everybody dumps on us. So the only people who are going to be positive about what you're doing, because if you beat them, they're going to hate you. If you don't beat them, they're going to shit on you. So you really don't have friends out there. Other Subaru people should be your friends. We don't have room within this community for Subaru on Subaru violence. So like, we're all in it together.
Yep.
That doesn't mean we don't have different approaches or whatever, but we have a very small community, and we really need to work together the best we can. So, yeah. And like Tanner just said in the chat, the Subaru community loves to dump on each other, and it's crazy. Like, and if you're seeing that a lot out of like, there's sects of this community that do get real, for lack of a better term, dumpy. And that's like how they try to approach marketing or whatever. That there just ain't enough room for that. And you'll see them, they'll come and go. I have things on the top of my mind exactly who I'm talking about, but like, they'll come and go. There's no reason to dump, and if you accomplish good things, even if those people accomplish awesome things within, doing cool things with Subarus. I'm not going to dump on them. I'm not going to hold them back. In fact, I'm going to celebrate whatever they're doing. I wish them the best of luck. I wish they would reciprocate that.
Yeah, I hope your YouTube channel does great, bro.
Yes, or whatever it is. Yeah, Tanner's going to think we're talking about him. We absolutely
No, we're not talking about Tanner. No.
love Tanner.
No. Tanner's a good dude, and I applaud him. I applaud him for wanting to take this on and learn. It'll be a cool experience for him.
Like, I'm going to give Tanner props. Tanner has actually been a really good resource for a lot of people getting into this. And I get it all the time. Hey, do you watch this YouTube channel, Media? Yeah, he does this, that, and the other thing. And like, it's great resource. It's a killer resource. And I really like that a lot of prominent people within the community, especially the low drama people, have done a really good job putting good information out. Smedia, Mr. Subaru, Flatirons Tuning, awesome information out there. And it's great that they're just constantly trying to make good, informative content. We're trying to do what we can over here on the podcast. It's just a different way of taking it in. But there's really I think we kind of we look a few years back and think that was the glory days of certain things, but honestly, we're not in a bad spot as a community right now. I think we've weeded out a lot of the bad stuff. We might not have the numbers we did before, but I don't think as a community, as we sit, we're in a bad place.
No, we're in the best place we've ever been. Honestly,
I think we are.
It's only gotten better. People are figuring out who the shitheads are, and they're fading. And people are figuring out who cares about them and actually will take care of them. So.
Yep. And people will take care of you.
The community has come together, and the community has spoken.
Yep. So, yeah, I think we're there, man. I think we did a podcast today. Graham, I can't thank you enough for coming on. That's a fairly complex topic that we tried to simplify, and I hope anybody who's stayed on for this long learned something. This is a show I've been wanting to do for a while because I do get a lot of questions on this, and I really wanted just a good resource to go, hey, go listen.
Yeah.
To You're gonna
I'm glad we did it now. We put it off for 2 weeks now because, as you can see in this conversation, it takes a lot of mental focus to really talk about this stuff and talk about it well. And the last couple of weeks was like we had Christmas and then we had New Year's, and I was just like, I'm like, bro, I can't AVCS talk today. So I'm not sure today was exactly great as it lined up with the grid life stuff, but it worked out. So
that I've had, and but either way, I think we did okay with it. And other than I think we did good. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do it?
Just email info@boostedperformancetuning.com. That creates a ticket in our system. Kim, my wonderful wife and partner at Boosted Performance, will answer back and point you in the right direction, whether it's consulting, whether it's here's the tune to buy, or go see Dewey first to get your parts. So that's the best way.
97% of anything you need to know tuning related, most of your questions, Kim knows better than Graham half the time. She can recall this information so fast. And I'm telling you, she's phenomenal. So don't think you have to speak to Graham. Kim's great.
Yeah, she gets you all ready to go for me. So by the time you get to me, you have everything you need. I know exactly what you have and what your expectations are, and you're good to go.
Yep. So other than that, if you guys got any questions for me, I'm easy to find. Shoot me an email. Give me a call. I'm up at IAG. Ask for Dewey. It's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. And we will catch you guys next week.